Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Mandy Morris. Mandy is a psychology coach, a therapist, and a best-selling author. She strives to educate on the benefits of therapy and hopes to combat the stigmas that mental health is a weakness and that change is unattainable. Mandy was such a blast to have on, and I really want to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. And before we get into the episode today, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. We are good to go. Mandy, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I am too. So my first question for you, what got you into the therapy field? What inspired you to get there?
Yeah. So, I think looking back, I've always been wired for this field, but I didn't really realize it. I grew up an athlete and I was told I should do athletic things. And so I was in college, I was on track to be an athletic trainer. And at the time in my life, I was also seeing my own therapist. Like I had a lot of things going on back at home and stuff. And she was really helpful. And I still to this day do not remember why I started volunteering at this crisis center, but I did for women. And I was called a lay counselor. So they knew that I couldn't actually give them therapy, but I just helped them and sat with them, whatever the situation was. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. Like it was so gratifying for me to be able to help these people. And it really made me start to question my degree because I already was feeling burnt out with sports to begin with. But the idea of like running down the field and, popping someone's shoulder back in, like that sounded kind of fun too. So, I remember talking to my parents saying I wanted to change my major. And when I told them what I wanted to do, I don't remember the exact words, but essentially they were like, do you really think like you're well enough to help people? And I was like, oh,
come on,
man. And, but I felt so strongly about it. Yeah, obviously I did it anyway. And then, from there, that's what got me into it. But since then, since being a therapist, what I'm passionate about has really developed more over time. So I'm a leadership psychology coach. I work with a lot of executives and help them with blocks and barriers and just feeling stuck. And I'm also a trauma expert. So I'm a certified EMDR clinician, which is a trauma modality. And, and trauma is like pretty much everybody. Right. So, but that very specific niche is using EMDR is what I'm passionate about too.
Right. Was there a reason that you went into that specific niche?
Which one, the leadership or the EMDR?
I mean, both. Let's start with EMDR.
Okay. Yeah. So I had heard the research on it for a while. It came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it wasn't really well known then. And then once I got into to college and grad school, so like I was finishing up grad school 2010, 2011, and have been hearing even more about it. And there's even more research that was coming out about how effective it is. It's very science-based. And as a therapist, while I love what I do, it can take some time depending on the person to really see results that like you want to see with them. And with EMDR, it's like, the relief is instant. It's a neurological process that helps your brain file away trauma in the right part of the brain instead of the part where it stays stored, where anything associated to it creates anxiety and triggers you. And it helps with any irrational or negative beliefs that you have about yourself. It clears those out, so you don't even believe that anymore. And like really within a couple sessions, clients are already feeling better. I've done my own EMDR therapy. And for some of the trauma that I had, for one in particular, I only needed about 5 sessions. On average, what used to take 1.5 to 2 years of traditional talk therapy for, they did a lot of the research on like soldiers coming back from the war and things like that for their post-traumatic stress, like 12 to 16 sessions, depending on the person. Sometimes it's 18 to 20, but if you think about how much time people spend in therapy versus being able to, your mind be able to heal so much more quickly. I love that. And I love watching that. I love witnessing that. And so hearing about, and I was skeptical at first. I was like, is this for real? And even my clients, they're like, I don't know about this. I'm like, I didn't either. Let's just try it. And then every time it's like, oh my God, it actually works. Like, you don't even have to believe that it works. It just does. So that I love seeing them get relief so quickly.
What does EMDR stand for?
It stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So they have found that they, meaning the researchers, have found that when you focus on whatever the target is, it's some traumatic memory, some negative belief you have about yourself connected to that, and you incorporate bilateral stimulus. So a lot of clinicians used to do eye movement. Virtually, I'll do bilateral tapping. In my office, I have TheraTappers where something pulses back and forth. But what that's doing is while you're focusing on the issue, your brain is getting activated on the left and right side alternately. And essentially, it activates your problem-solving part of your brain, that mechanism. And so it sorts through all the irrational stuff. Like, so let's say, one of the beliefs was, I'm not good enough, connected to whatever the event was. You can know that's true, but it doesn't always feel true. So there's a disconnect from the mind body. And so with this process, your mind naturally heals itself through this modality because of how the brain works. And then the logical things actually feel true. And you don't even see it through the same irrational lens, and it really crushes the emotional charge connected to the memory.
Right.
So that's essentially what it does.
Interesting. Now, is there a reason that the problem solving part of the brain gets disconnected? Like, is that just over time, or?
So when something traumatic happens, and again, trauma can be many things. We call them the big T traumas. So, natural disasters, murder, rape, all these horrible things that we think about when you think of trauma. But there's also what's called little T traumas, and the little T has nothing to do with the value of the trauma, but essentially they're things that happen over time and accrue over time, like neglect, childhood neglect, living with an addict, being bullied, going through a divorce. Like, it could be any of these things. And so if that becomes something traumatic, essentially anything that exceeds your brain's ability to cope is what trauma is. Okay. So if something happens that you didn't know how to cope with, and it created disruption in your brain, that experience, that neural network that is connected to your long-term memory that has that experience, and it stays stuck in the anxiety part of the brain. That's why if something connected to it, it could be something out of the blue, like a thought, a feeling, whatever, you get reactivated, you get triggered. And so it's not so much that your problem solving mechanism goes offline. It's just that gets stuck in that part of the brain. And so we have to reactivate it, the problem solving part of your brain, while working through the memory. But to be able to do that on our own, we usually can only process through like up to the most distressing point, and then from there it's too distressing, it's too emotional charging, and so that's why having a guide, someone to help you through it, is important too.
Right. Your brain just tries to protect you from it. It's like,
Yep.
let's not do that.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. It's too painful. Yeah. Yeah. Your brain's always trying to protect you. Yep.
Man. Now for the leadership side, like what got you into that?
Yeah. So initially what got me into it, so part of my story is I was married for 7 years, and he was diagnosed with a mood disorder and a narcissistic personality disorder. And that, especially the last few years of the marriage, things were really bad. And leaving that situation was hard, and just going through all of that and then trying to heal and rebuild afterwards took me a long time. And so I had created a program, and I still have the program, but it's a 3-month program for people who are trying to heal or break out of toxic relationships. And as I'm doing this, I'm like, this is the same thing that happens in the workplace.
Right.
You're married to your job, you have these, and not all bosses or leadership, and some of it isn't ill-intended, but they don't realize the toxicity that comes from that. And so I had, started trying to do this, explore this more. And then I just happened to get some clients who were executives, and then they referred other leaders to me. It was kind of like a word of mouth thing. And I have found that I have a really good knack for really difficult men in leadership. And so, yeah, it's just become something that I really love doing, because when I can help these leaders break through, I mean, they may not even know they're stuck. They just know that their business isn't growing as fast as they want it to be, or they're having issues with their employees, or issues at home that are coming into work. I mean, it could be anything. But once I help them really figure out how they're wired, how their brain's wired and why, and the issues that we need to resolve and heal that are going to make them like even better. And then not only do I get to see them become more free and productive and healed, but now I get to see their business grow as well, and the joy that comes from that, and all of that. So it was in my mind, but then it also kind of fell into my lap, and then I just kind of realized I had a knack for it.
Right. Amazing. Now, when you were going through the making this course and helping everything, helping people in the workplace and everything, did you find that it helped you in your own personal life as well?
Yeah. So I don't actually do the course I do have courses for the workplace, but that course for people trying to heal or break out of toxic relationships, that sparked that for me. That program is essentially, I created something I wish I had had.
Right.
Because I didn't know how to deal with what was going on. I didn't know what gaslighting was, or what these various manipulative tactics were. And even as a therapist, like I was a therapist at the time, and I was seeing my other therapist, and he literally was like, showed me some of the things I give to my clients. But it's so hard to see when you're in it sometimes.
Right.
And I was so young at the time, and all of that. And so, yeah, absolutely. And it was really healing for me, even in creating it and helping other people through it, to really reaffirm some of the things that I had to do to take care of myself and protect myself and get out of the situation and all of that. So it's always good for me, or healing for me, to be able to help other people who've been in these types of relationships. Because I truly feel like the expert, because not only do I know what I know clinically, but I've lived it. And so it just comes easy for me.
Right. Yeah.
But
No, I watched a video that you spoke in about like being in a relationship with a narcissist. I just like, I really appreciate you being open about it, because I know a lot of people who have been in relationships with people like that, and they just can't see it, because it's so much easier to see when you're on the outside looking in, right?
Right. Well, and it's not like it's bad all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, it'd be so much easier.
Right.
But there's the honeymoon phase where everything is great and the person is apologizing, and then they're like, the superhero or the princess or the knight in shining armor, whoever it is, and you think things are great and things stay okay for a while, and then the tension building and the gaslighting starts, or whatever else it may be, until then there's the big, whatever that big eruption or crisis is, and so and with that, one of the things I really educate my clients on that I wish I had known more about at the time is trauma bonding.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain literally gets addicted to that cycle, that emotional cycle. And those are some of the reasons why it's hard. And I really encourage and give my clients tools on how to protect themselves from hearing when people say, well, why didn't you get out sooner? Or like things like that. It's because they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know how hard it is and what all is going on. So yeah, but thank you for saying that.
Of course. Now, is there a reason the brain gets addicted to stuff like that? Because when you're not in that and you hear that, you think it's dumb. Like,
Right.
for lack of a better term, because you're like, your brain gets addicted to being miserable. Like, that's stupid. But when you're
Right.
in it, it just makes sense. Is there a reason for that?
Right. Yeah. So let's take a toxic relationship aside. Whenever you start dating or put, someone new with those first 12 months, whatever it may be, your pleasure and reward system gets activated, and it has the same effects as if you're on opioids.
Mm.
So those feel-good feelings, that intense infatuation, all of that. So when our connections with people creates chemical changes in the brain.
Right.
Now, when you're in a toxic relationship like that, where there's the abuse cycle is going on, whether it's emotional, physical, spiritual, mental, whatever it is, when that honeymoon phase happens and that charm happens and whatever that is, that's activating the pleasure and reward system part of your brain. While on the other end, your brain gets into protective and survival mode. Mm-hmm. When it's in the bad part, right? And so that relief you feel from like it being over, like that cycle being over and thinking you have your person back and all of that, it bonds you in a very weird way
right.
to the person, because now you have that connection back again. And those chemicals in your brain are still, they're spurting out dopamine, that's in the pleasure and reward system part of the brain. And there's lots of other variables to it as well, but in simple version, that's essentially what happens.
Right. It's kind of like that saying where they're like, we've been through hell and back together.
Right. Yeah. Like Stockholm Syndrome. It's when
right.
the person, whoever who's being victimized or whatever, doesn't want to leave their abuser because they have formed such a bond and attachment to that, as weird as it may sound. The thought of leaving is too scary. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you hear of a lot of like the battered women syndrome, and like people who can't leave and things like that for various reasons. But it does, it creates, it's not a positive bond, it's a negative bond, but it still creates a chemical bond and connection between the two of you.
Right. Now, in terms of like a narcissist and like identifying one, for me personally, I think one of the biggest challenges is not knowing exactly what narcissism is. I think there's just this misunderstanding.
It's thrown around so much.
Yeah,
everyone's a narcissist. Yeah,
everyone is. Everyone's been called one. So, what is narcissism?
Okay, yeah, yeah. So there's a spectrum of narcissistic traits that can happen. And just because you have a narcissistic trait, which a lot of us do, to some degree,
right,
doesn't mean you're a narcissist or have a narcissistic personality disorder. So, some hallmark traits, grandiose sense of self. So that's the person who's up on their high horse. everyone's beneath them. You're wrong, they're right. The other end of that is the person who's the victim to everything. And, you know, the world is their bad deal and everyone's out to get them, and, you know, filled with lots of guilt trips and things like that. And so both ends of the spectrum are all about self. It's all self-focused, right?
Right.
And then there is, with a lot of narcissists, there's a need to maintain a certain image to the public. So this could be the people who, you know, while they're out in public, they have to associate themselves with people of higher status or perceived higher status. They have to get the best stuff, order the best food, because they want to display an image to the world of how great they are, right? So, I mean, it can go to some extremes where, you know, you can be sitting at dinner with a narcissist and just the food is not up to par. Send it back, you know, like really like big things like that. And then there's ones that are more subtle as well. You know, the relationship I was in was very much a covert narcissist. It wasn't so overt like that. It was his bad deal. He was the victim to everything. And so it masked as depression to me. But in reality, there was some depression, but there was narcissism. And so it was hard to distinguish between the two. Other hallmark traits, I mean, and I think the biggest one is they don't have the capacity to have empathy.
Right.
So this can be hard to tell sometimes because narcissists know what they need to say to get what they want. And it may look or sound like empathy, but as you get to know one over time, they can't understand why you feel the way you feel. They can't put themselves in your shoes. Your feelings don't matter. Their feelings matter. And then that's where a lot of gaslighting comes into place. And gaslighting is when an individual will try to make someone else's reality feel like it wasn't true, or that their feelings, they shouldn't feel that way. And they'll twist things around that actually makes you question your own feelings and your own memory. So, you know, and that's a tactic that comes from lack of empathy. Right. So, and that's the biggest one. And with people who have a narcissistic personality disorder, this affects, I mean, their daily function, and they can't have any sort of a healthy relationship. You know, there are a lot of clinicians and therapists out there who think narcissists can heal. And I think that given milder cases of them, you can learn empathy. You can learn it some. It's still then just a skill you need to have versus actually being able to feel it.
Right.
But you will never find a narcissist in therapy because they don't have a problem.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, so, no, they're fine.
I mean, and there's a lot of other traits as well, but in terms of the biggies, and let's keep in mind, entitlement isn't narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because we lived in a very entitled culture.
Right.
Very narcissistic culture in some ways. You know, that comes from a form of selfishness. That doesn't mean that person, for whatever they're entitled for, can't still have empathy for people, you know, or whatever it may be. So that there's a lot more to it, but those are the big ones.
Well, no wonder there's such a misunderstanding. There's so many different factors that go into play.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And usually with narcissism or personality disorders, they are co-occurring with another issue. Like in my case, he had a mood disorder, you know, weren't sure if it was definitely depression, wasn't sure if it was bipolar. And so the symptoms of that for me really masked, like I was saying, these other things that were going on, you know, or sometimes there's addiction that comes into play. There's, you know, and so it is, but the thing that I've realized and that, you know, I've learned and talked with my clients about, and when I share my story, I talk about it, is A narcissist can only maintain their good behavior because they're very charming. On the flip side of it, super charming.
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost too good to be true. And that should be a red flag.
Right.
Too good to be true, saying all the right things all the time, over the top, and that's how and especially a lot of, they'll attract a lot of people pleasers, or empaths are really attracted to narcissists. And I'm one of those because, we feel so much for them. And then those initial wonderful tactics really pull and at our heartstrings and like, it's hard. Right. And so, but yeah, so they appear to be great, but over time, and this is how you'll tell, is over time, they can't maintain that behavior. They literally start to decompose over time. And it's a weird word to say. It's like the veneer coming off. Like they cannot maintain that in home or in a personal relationship. They might be able to maintain it to some degree in the public, but they can't keep up with that long term. Mm-hmm. And that's why really get to know somebody, really spend a lot of time with them, especially if you're going to be in a relationship. Like, don't let things slide that that you wouldn't encourage someone else to not tolerate,
right.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because when you're in that, because I've been in relationships where I won't call them a narcissist, but like where they'll do something or they'll say something to me, and for me, I'm like, oh, I'll just let it pass because I love them. Right. But then if my friend were in a relationship and they said that, I'd be like, hey man, you got to tell her that's not okay.
Yeah, not okay at all. Yeah. And that's that exact thing that you just said is what I encourage a lot of people to do, so you can get out of your own head. If this was your kid, if this was your best friend, if this was your daughter or your son, what would you tell them to do if this was happening? Because we can access our logic way better for other people than we can ourselves.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you were going through like this experience, when did you start to go, there's something off here? Like you went from the honeymoon phase to, okay, maybe I should be talking to someone about this.
Yeah, it's a great question. So like I said, I, was encouraging him to get therapy and him to get help because at the time I thought he was depressed. He had a lot of anxiety. I thought that was the case. Right. Mm-hmm. And when I started saying I was going to, get him some help, talk to some other people about it, that's when he basically was like, you better not tell anybody what's going on. This is my personal stuff. I can deal with it. And he would threaten to take his life if I left, or even just if we got in a fight or something like that. And that became emotional blackmail that I know was going on for a while. And then I remember one day I have two older brothers. I called my oldest brother, Dan. And I was like, this is what's going on. And I'm really worried that like he's going to hurt himself and, or me or whatever. And that's when he said, he's holding you emotionally hostage to the relationship. Mm. I was like, oh man, you're right. Yeah. And, anyway, so my brother actually drove out to the house, intervened. We tried to get him help, and like, he wasn't having it. And, and after that, he like kind of agreed to go on medication. And I was like, well, if you're not going to get help, I am, because I don't know how to deal with this. And I literally was, he would gaslight and manipulate so much, I couldn't remember things. So I started documenting conversations after we would have them, just so I could make sure that I wasn't the crazy person. Right. But then I took that to my therapist. And he was wonderful, just to kind of work through those things. And then that's when I really started seeing things for what they really were. Because our brain can rationalize anything. Yep. If you believe you shouldn't get divorced, you're going to find a way to think that you need to stay in it. Right. If you believe that you can't survive financially, then you're going to find a way to make yourself believe that you got to stay in it. It's just how our brain works. And so, you know, it was so to your question, it was when I knew I couldn't do anything else. Like, I was at a point where I was sick and tired of being so hurt and sad all the time. And in this relationship, you know, well, if he was going to refuse help, then that why should that stop me from doing what I need to do? And he was not happy when I started going to therapy. But yeah, that was my initial reason that I needed to get help.
Right. How hard was it to finally put an end to it? Because when you're so invested, it's like, this is part of my life and it needs to be part of my life. And you mentioned your brain rationalizing it, like you need this in your life. Like, how do you break that?
Yeah. So once you're self-aware, you can't become unself-aware.
Right.
And the awareness of especially the mental and emotional abuse that was happening, and being able to see, like, actually observe, oh, this thing he's saying right now is a manipulative tactic. Oh, I don't have to go with that. Like, really started to see what was happening. That's when I knew, like, I had to protect myself, and I mean, emotionally, you know, and mentally, and I mean, sometimes physically, but in my situation, those were the main ones. And so as I was beginning to set boundaries, I realized even more how much he doesn't have the capacity to care about me because of his narcissism. And then from that, in my story, in my situation, so I'll never forget the first time my friend Rhonda, who's co-worker or colleague, her and I started Mosaic, our private practice together. It had been a bad night. Some big eruption had happened. I almost canceled breakfast with her, told her about it, and she convinced me to spend one night with her. And me opening up to her and allowing myself to spend one night away was the thing that started the trajectory of being able to really break free from everything. That first phone call to tell him I wasn't going to come home, I was going to stay with my friend. When you start setting boundaries with a toxic person, with a narcissist, they push back real hard, and it's scary.
Yeah.
And I just remember I eventually just hung up the phone because it was terrible. And one night turned into 3 nights, and then that turned into, I'm not going to come home until you start getting help. You know, he got help, and then I said, well, I need a few more days, so I want to meet with the therapist together. And he did not like that. So at this point, he's losing control, right? And this was where he drove up to my office. I wasn't there, thank God. And because I wasn't there, he essentially, I mean, he lost it, and he drove his truck into a tree in the woods. He was okay. His truck was totaled. He said he was trying to hurt himself. My therapist politely but firmly called him out on the fact that he was throwing a tantrum. Right. And thank God I wasn't there, you know? And so, and the reason I share that experience is because, so I started setting boundaries, and then he did something that I didn't think he would actually do. And it just changed how I viewed him from that point. Now I'm really scared of you. So that made it easier for me to feel really validated and firm in steps I needed to take. And, you know, so he got help for a while, things got better. We actually, tried to see if it could work for a little, but then things went right back to the same. And the final straw was, he was gaslighting me about something, and I knew I wasn't wrong. I just knew it. And, it was about using drugs or something. And I found the evidence. I found my evidence that I needed. And my therapist had always encouraged me to keep a bag packed in the car in case I ever need it. I got in my car, I went to kickboxing, beat the shit out of the bag.
Yep.
And then I went to my friends, and then we game planned it from there. And actually telling him, it took another 3 or 4 months before I actually told him I wanted a divorce and all of that. But that was my journey of breaking free from that. And so in that, especially when you're in a toxic relationship, we tend to keep things secret.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's a lot of shame around it. But me being open to tell my brother, to tell my friend, to go see somebody, I mean, that was the thing that got me out of it.
Right.
And that's what people should do.
Yeah. There's so much hesitancy around that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because for some reason, we have this like need to be perfect to the people around us. Like, oh no, there's nothing wrong with my relationship.
Right. Yeah. And if we could just start talking more about it, we could probably help each other out a whole lot more,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then on the flip side of it, if you're the outside looking in, you're like, I don't want to tell them that this isn't perfect.
Right. Well, and so the people I went to are the people I knew I could trust with such fragile information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to just go tell anybody. And I am a big believer that trust is earned, and that you have to earn the right to hear my story in terms of, your trustworthiness and love and kindness and respect that we show for each other, and all of that. And so those are my people, my brothers and Rhonda. And then I had another small group of friends that I eventually told. But other than that, no, but that was enough.
Right.
And so I wouldn't say, yeah, go share, all your problems to whoever, because then that could be more harmful. But, put on an index card, a little tiny sticky note. Who goes on that sticky note? Who loves you in spite of your flaws,
right,
or because of them, or whatever. Those are the people you go to.
Right. Absolutely. Well, sorry, I think you mentioned this. How many years ago was this?
So I got married in 2008. Yeah. And then 7 years, 2015 is when we got divorced.
When did you start realizing that the healing was working?
That's a great question. So as I learned how to set boundaries, I used to literally shake at the thought of setting a boundary with him, be really scared about it. And I got to a point where I was so confident and assertive, because I practiced doing it over time, that I knew my mind was getting healthier. And the things that I had feared breaking away from, or the bad things that could happen, I saw that I had options, and I had other, so I knew my brain wasn't in this post-traumatic stress response anymore. I was able to think about that and to deal with that. And, and I had to make my own decision for myself, what was right for me to do. And there was a lot of pushback, not a lot of pushback, but for people who didn't know the situation. And I grew up in a home where you don't get divorced, spiritual beliefs and all of that were, part of that. And so that community, for the few that I had shared it with, they really pushed back on, well, you should make it work. And I'm like, I've tried to make it work. This is more harmful for me. And when I was really able to stop caring about what everyone else thought and make my own decision for myself, and I mean, it was like, I just felt different. I didn't feel scared. I mean, didn't have all that anxiety. And then I had a lot of issues after that. A lot of trust issues, a lot of fears around dating. And so I got myself in with a therapist, and I did EMDR around that, did EMDR around some other stuff too. And really worked on my trauma that happened from the relationship. Because for so long, I believed that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a good enough wife. I wasn't important. I'm not lovable. Like those are the things that it would make me feel about myself that didn't go away just because I got out of the relationship. And so, I mean, it's been a journey, but, you know, looking back now, it's like, I don't even know who I was back then. I can't even recognize that person, but like in a good way, you know? So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that
No,
was kind of my process.
absolutely. Yeah, it does. And I think for me, one of the reasons I would hesitate getting out of a relationship that I knew was toxic or that wasn't helping me in any way
Mm-hmm.
was like when you've been with someone for so long,
Yeah.
the idea of restarting
Mm-hmm.
hurts.
It does. Absolutely. Yeah. It hurts and it's scary. And a lot of times when you're in a relationship for a long time, you feel like you should stick it out because you have history,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that plays a part of it too. But that's where the reality check comes in. What is this going to do to you if things, let's say things stay exactly the way they are, they never change? What is that going to do to you 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Um, and, you know, just because someone's toxic doesn't mean that they're not willing to change or work on it, you know? Like we all have toxic tendencies. And so if there's a willingness for the person to grow with you and to work on the relationship with you, that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
In my situation, there was willingness only because he wanted to check it off the box. The minute therapy stopped for him, the minute everything went back to normal, right? And so in that sense, there was not willingness there to change. And so, you know, I mean, even though I've been divorced, I'm very much pro marriage,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also pro health, you know, and, you know, you have you always, and you can't control what other people do. So yeah, it is. I mean, to your point, it's really hard, the thought of starting over, but it's also really scary, the thought of staying in something that is going to make you mentally and physically ill.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now on that exact same note, for people listening who aren't may have never experienced that with a relationship, but maybe with work,
Mm-hmm.
like how can they identify when the work that they're in either has a boss that is experiencing narcissistic behavior or
Mm-hmm.
just a job that is crushing them?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So, um, in terms of toxic work environments, these are the work environments where there's not respect to the individuals, or you don't feel respected. Um, you don't feel valued. This is the kind of boss probably who, well, it wasn't that bad. Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Like gaslighting. Bosses gaslight as well.
Yeah.
You know, and you feel diminished. Or you're coming home and you're just so stressed, or you have anxiety over the thought of going to work the next day. Like, so it's time to evaluate, you know, what is going on if you're experiencing those things. um, you know, for when you recognize that your leader is about the numbers and not about their what their purpose is, what their goal actually is, what the passion is for what they're doing, and they don't consider people and their emotional needs and all of that. I mean, when it's all about the numbers, it's pretty good chance that one, that job probably, that company probably won't be there 5 years from now, or that leader won't be successful 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
And two, that this will eat you alive.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's one of the things why I get excited about working with leaders, because I would love to not only help and see them grow, but help them create environments where people enjoy going to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a safe space, not a toxic place. It's a place where they can feel valued, seen, and heard, not, you know, some person in the back who has to get you a certain number in the bank account or whatever. So yeah.
Right. Do you ever get pushback when you talk to these leaders?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they usually will come to me for maybe a mild issue, that um, that they need a coach for, or someone has recommended that they, go see Mandy. Just it'll be good. Try it out, and then so there's resistance, right? Um, but once there's people like anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
like people in positions of power, leadership, they're human beings, and sometimes they don't. And any of us, we can't see um, where our blind spots, where our stuck places are, because 95% of our brain, like right now, we're only using 5% of our brain, this conscious time, that what we're doing right now, 95% is subconscious long-term memory.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's reasons why people continue in certain patterns of behavior, certain patterns of thinking, keep getting stuck, in that same thing at work, or can't grow their business, or stuck in that, getting caught up in that same toxic relationship again. So I mean, there's reasons why. So to your answer, usually once I can get them talking, and then just kind of help unravel, a little bit what's going on, and they can take it or they can leave it. I've not gotten much pushback once they feel comfortable and see that, one, there's a lot of science behind it, and two, the potential for them to be even better and grow anymore, the payoff of working through their stuff, that's really appealing to them too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think for yeah, I think for people I know and myself, like I was never a boss per se, but I've been in a leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think growing up, I had those opportunities, like captain of the swim team or captain
Mm-hmm.
of this club, yada yada.
Yeah.
I think I had a great misunderstanding of what a leader was. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was, the level-headed, strong-headed
Right.
person like you see in the movies. Like you watch I don't even know, the where they're all lined up ready for war, and the guy in the
Yeah.
front's like, "Oh, let's go. I'm not afraid of anything." That's what I thought a leader was.
Right.
Now, for anyone listening who may be in a leadership role but may have this misunderstanding, in your experience, like what defines a good leader?
uh, and I actually just did a post about this yesterday, I think. A good leader is concerned about the impact they're going to have with whatever it is that they're doing. Like, that is their concern. So their motive and their heart in it is first and foremost. But what makes a good leader is someone who is able to look at the people they are leading and know them so well that they pull out their strengths and let them and help them feel so confident in using it that now everyone is operating out of their own genius. Everyone is pumped about using their skill set. A good leader knows how to pull that out of people, and understands that we're human beings, and we have feelings, and feelings need to matter. Vulnerability is important, showing that you're a human too, and having that sort of connection with those that you lead. And for those with like super big companies, training other leaders to be the same way, so that and it just makes sense anyway. Why would you not be invested in who you're working with, and pull out their creativity, their strengths, what they're wired to be able to do? I mean, you're going to be so much more productive. But a lot of leaders don't want to take the time.
Mm.
So you're going to either take time in the beginning investing in other people, or you're going to take time on the back end trying to fix whatever you haven't been able to create, or where you've gotten stuck. So either way.
Right.
But yeah, for any leaders listening, that would be what I would say.
I love it. And my last question for you, Mandy, if there's anyone listening who, and I don't even necessarily want to get super specific about it, but like who have been in a similar situation to yours, like they're in the middle of being in a relationship with someone who is a narcissist, or they're in a line of work where their boss is one, or they're whatever it is, they're in a toxic situation and they're starting to go, There's something here. I need to get out of this. What would you want to tell them to get them on the right track?
Yeah. Well, first I would tell them to start talking about it. Because the more we can process what's happening and really make sense of things, the easier it is to get clarity around it. Whether that's with a friend or a therapist or a support person, whatever it may be. And then really taking a step back and giving yourself that reality check. What's going to happen if I stay in this for another year, another 2 years, another 3 years? You know what's happening to you. You know where you're at physically and mentally. And those simple reality checks gives you a lot of your answers. And it could be maybe that you need to set boundaries, though. It could be maybe that, there's certain things you can do to help the situation as well. And so learning about that and understanding how you're feeling is important, because how you feel, you're never right or wrong for how you feel it. And it always has to matter. And our number one job is to take care of ourselves. So I think just stepping back and talking, and giving yourself those reality checks, those would be like the tiny steps that I would take.
Right. I love it. Where can my listeners find you and your work?
They can find, the easiest way is just to go to my website, which is super original. It's mandysthetherapist.com. And that has all my stuff on there. It also has all my social media. So if you want to follow me on social media, you can just click on the links to that. It has my stuff about EMDR, stuff about leadership on there. The Fast Forward to Freedom program, which is the trying to heal or break free from toxic relationships. All of that's on there.
I love it. I'll put that link down below. Mandy, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. You've been a wonderful host.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.